May 4th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Pearson.
Yes.
Senator DePalma is here. Senator Paolino.
Here.
Senator Acosta.
Present.
Senator Cano.
Here.
Senator Murray.
Present.
Senator Seveny. There are 7 members. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Felag's here too.
Senator Felag is
Aye.
present. 8 members in attendance.
Apologies, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. The first item up on our agenda is House Bill 6037 by Representative Kazarian, an act relating to tax agreement between the City of East Providence and ExxonMobil Oil Corporation. This is a duplicate to Senator Lawson's bill that we had previously passed. Senator Seveny makes a motion to move passage.
Second.
Second by Senator Cano. The clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Pearson.
Yes.
Senator DePalma. Senator DePalma, yes. Senator Felag.
Yes.
Senator Paolino.
Yes.
Senator Acosta.
Yes.
Senator Cano.
Yes.
Senator Murray.
Yes.
Senator Seveny. There are 8 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next on our agenda is going to be House Bill 6122, an act relating to appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. We have 2 different sections of the budget up this evening. We have both the Department of Administration's fiscal 21 supplemental and 22 budget, as well as Article 1, Section 5 related to RICAP repayment delay, Article 2, Sections 4 through 6 related to state funds, and then we'll proceed to the Public Utilities Commission hearing on their budgets, as well as Article 8, Public Utilities and Carriers. I know that Joe Kodega from the Budget Office is with us, as well as the Director of Administration, Director Thorson. Joe, I'll probably turn it over to you, unless Director Thorson, you want to take the lead.
I'm glad to defer to Director Thorson and pass it right off to him. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. And thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee. As always, it's good to be with you this evening, and I look forward to presenting with my colleagues at the department on our budget and on Article 2. But before we get into the budget, I'd like to take a moment to thank our dedicated public servants who have worked hard to keep us safe during the pandemic. For example, recently had the opportunity to visit with General Callahan at the Rhode Island National Guard headquarters and learned that Ring vaccinated over 160,000 seniors in various care facilities around the state. And you may have also encountered our troops when you got vaccinated. I hope you've been vaccinated. I've also visited the state's warehouse where Director Pappas and the RIEMA staff are managing our PPE supplies for all RI cities and towns and school districts. Think of a Home Depot with nothing but PPE in it. That's what the warehouse looks like. And I also want to thank the General Assembly, specifically this committee, for your engagement in addressing the hardships that Rhode Island has faced this year. It's been anything but normal, but we really do value your input and appreciate your comments. My colleagues before you this evening are not strangers to this committee, and we look forward to remaining a resource to you, for you and your staff, not just emerging from the hardships of COVID, but also passing a purposeful fiscal year 22 budget. The Department of Administration has a mission of managing the state's financial, human, and other resources in support of other state agencies carrying out their responsibilities to provide the citizens of the state of Rhode Island with the most responsive and cost-effective services possible. We strive to deliver the best value of taxpayer dollars for our citizens, and we are constantly looking at how to improve processes and increase the value of our work for the agencies that supply direct critical resources for the residents of Rhode Island. DOA provides so many services to other agencies through budgeting, technology planning, procurement, and others. DOA has played a central role in delivering these services in addition to COVID response efforts, logistics, etc., and I'm proud of our efforts. I've also learned from my first 2 months on this job that there are areas in which we can improve. Investing in these areas, specifically in technology, will not just improve efficiencies today, but well into the future. With that, what I'd like to do is transition to a PowerPoint presentation that we'll go through pretty quickly. There are a number of folks presenting with me this evening. Jonathan Wilmer unfortunately had another commitment, so we've got the rest of the team here, including Vijay Kumar, who many of you know is the Chief Information Officer. Dottie Pascal, who you knew as the head of internal audit, but now it has been serving as the head of the Pandemic Recovery Office. We've also got Joe Kodega, Haley Fisher, and Libby Kinsey. And Dan Orgel, I think, is here as well. Yes. So if we can go ahead, and Robert is going to be helping us with the slides. So, how are we doing, Robert? Okay. We good? Okay. All right. Just want to spend a few minutes bragging about DOA and talking about our priorities. The real meat of the presentation is in Joe's portion of the Article 2, which is why I'm sure you're all here. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about DOA's accomplishments and an overview. So, as you know, DOA covers the Central Business Office, DCAM, DO-IT, Equity, and Energy Resources, Accounts and Control, Health Source Rhode Island, Human Resources, Management and Budget, Purchases, Planning, and Legal. Together, this is just under 650 authorized FTEs, and we essentially function as the state's wholesale functioner for all of the different agencies. These services that we provide is really what makes every other agency run, whether it's their space, their computers, their hiring, their budget. Essentially, we make other agencies run. And it requires a lot of effort, and our principal responsibility really is in developing and administering the budget, which we're here to talk more about tonight. Robert, can you? Thank you. In terms of some of the accomplishments I wanted to highlight for you this evening, DOA pre-ARPA has managed financial compliance and governance functions for $4 billion in federal funds related to the COVID relief efforts. DO-IT has enabled nearly 3,000 state employees to telework since the beginning of COVID-19 and assisted agencies in providing customer services online. We have been going through a major initiative in modernizing our procurement through Ocean State Procures, which is enabling vendors to interact electronically with the state, which is a big improvement. And the Office of Energy Resources is conducting an economic and energy market analysis and developing actionable policies and programs to help Rhode Island meet 100% of its electricity demand with renewables by 2030. The success of the state's health benefits exchange, HSRI, has resulted in one of the lowest uninsured rates in the country at under 4%. Since its launch in 2013, HSRI has improved and expanded access to coverage for Rhode Islanders while reducing its agency budget. And this one is near and dear to my heart since I worked there for a time. Robert? In terms of priorities, we have quite a few priorities. I'll just highlight a few. One is something called the ERP Strategic Plan, which is essentially is something that is written up in the recent auditor's report as being the source of a lot of need for the state to get its accounts in control and basic accounting functions, payroll, HR, and just the basic stuff of modernizing the platform from which we do our accounting, which was brand new when I started at the state back in 1995. Let me say that again, 1995. So with HR, we'll be modernizing the state's recruitment and hiring practices. We're looking at ways to penetrate the market electronically and with purchases. I mentioned Ocean State Procures. OMB is continuing its pandemic response through budgetary assistance, which is extensive support, and auditing programs created through the COVID-19 response effort. We'll get ready for Land Use 2050, the state's unified plan, and there is something called a disparity study, which has been in development for nearly 2 years and is near completion. It's the basis on which the state's affirmative action guidelines will be founded. It's basically the legal analysis that allows us to implement affirmative action guidelines, and that should be coming out within the next month for sure. DCAM is addressing deferred maintenance issues across the state. There are many buildings that need fixing or disposing of. And the Office of Energy Resources is contemplating an RFP for scalable offshore wind resources. So, likewise, HSRI has been experiencing some interesting times because many folks came off the rolls to go onto Medicaid, and the federal legislation has deferred their coming back onto HSRI. So that's been kind of a challenge for them on the one hand. On the other hand, the legislation has also included a greater subsidy to make health insurance more affordable on the exchange. So that's very interesting of what's going on there. Robert? The long and short of it is that we plan to continue managing our oversight of the federal stimulus funds for an effective and efficient pandemic response. We plan to invest in the technology that is the backbone of our payroll, financial management, and human resource operations to promote the continued development of a diverse workforce with ample opportunities for professional growth.
Director, before we head into the technology side, I know there's a couple questions if you don't mind jumping in. Senator Khanna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Director Thorson. I just wanted to keep consistency, as I always have asked previous administrations about this question. So you had mentioned about the online procurement, and I just wanted to make sure that you clarify that with the procurement, you also taking the standard of the law of the minority business enterprise, woman business enterprise. I keep with consistency with the same question across the board, just to make sure that there is no waivers and to make sure that we continue supporting and hopefully increasing the percentage of minority business enterprise, women business enterprise when it comes to the procurement processes. So that's my first question, and I'd like to see if you have anything to say about that.
Yes, Senator, well, thank you for your question. And I can say two things about that. One is that the disparity study will enable us to actually analyze the data and facts related to these efforts, but also the Ocean State Procures electronification, if you will, of our procurement will not only allow us to execute more efficiently, but be able to report more reliably. So we'll be able to produce better reporting for you to gain better insights into just how well we are doing. So those are the two things that I think that you should be looking for coming up. And no, we're not planning to sacrifice any any kind of objectives with regard to disparity or affirmative actions. We're trying to address those issues, and I think that the governor has made this a priority, and we are working very hard to come out with a plan in the very near future.
Thank you, Director. Really appreciate that. And that was my next question. Actually, it has been a priority of mine and some members of the Senate as well. So when it comes to the disparity study, which I heard a timeline of the next month or so, would you be able to send us a copy of that disparity study as soon as it's available, just to make sure that, we know what is in the findings, and we could also contribute to to help, your department get, a way out of the affirmative action guidance that you're trying to get from there. The other thing that I want to, that goes along the same line is when it comes to hiring. So when you talk about disparity studies, include so many things, but also one thing that I have been very specific, I know Senator Quesada always asks about this as well, is the diversity in the staff in our Department of Administration and across our state. So are you looking to, or does the disparity study is going to include any type of hiring, guidance when it comes to increased diversity in our staff in the state government?
Yes, Senator Cano, thanks for the question. Really, there's two answers that I want to provide to you. On the study itself, I can commit to you that it will be provided when it becomes available. It will be a public document. So we'll make sure that the Senate is provided a copy. And I would dare say that we'll be even prepared to talk about it and comment on it. With respect to your other question, which relates to affirmative action goals and such, I can promise you that we will have reporting on that is improved from what it has been in the past.
Thank you, Director. Really appreciate it. And I just want to commend the governor's office and Governor McKee for making this a priority, as it is for many of us. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is certainly something that we do have a lot of work to do, and this is a good start. So I really want to commend you on that, and looking forward to working together to make sure we advance those good, affirmative action guidance that you talked about. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator Cano.
No.
Senator Seveny.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Director, my question is related to the DCAM folks and this list of deferred maintenance. How does one go about seeing what's on that list and what the scheduled dates are for them getting to particular items?
I don't think it's a public list, because I don't know that it's all compiled, and I don't know that it's all in one pile, because it has a tendency to go by agency. But I'll have to get back to you on that, because we talked about it at length with our DCAM folks, but it could range from group homes to other state properties. And I'm not sure if it's categorized by DCAM or by agency. Joe, do you have any idea for me on that one, or?
We certainly have the resources and studies that describe the deferred maintenance, and we can provide a written response on that one, certainly.
Okay.
Well, let me make it easy for you. There's a group home at 82 Willow Lane in Portsmouth, which happens to be my district. And it has a fence that goes all the way around the property for several reasons. And the fence is falling down. And it's been falling down for a very long time. And it's disturbing the neighbor next door, who calls me up all the time and disturbs me. I really shouldn't say that. He's a constituent where I'm trying to, get this thing fixed. But the frustration is you can't really get any commitment nor any sort of a target date on when they're going to get to some of this stuff. And, some of these things, really do need to be fixed. So I'm particularly interested in that one, but it seems to me that somebody somewhere ought to have a schedule of all the things that are on the list and when they're going to try to get to them.
And Senator and Director, if I could jump in on that, I think it likely warrants a bigger discussion specifically on the decisions that we make around RICAP repayment and the rainy day fund relate into what's available in RICAP. And I think the decisions that we ultimately make in that will be something that we want to have a good understanding of. Understanding that when we pulled money out of the rainy day fund, we took resources out of RICAP by either not putting money back in or potentially now that we have the resources to put the money back in, that should create a larger pool of funds available for RICAP. And I know the administration would typically do a budget amendment in the May timeframe with a series of RICAP adjustments. I think to Senator Sebany's point, that may tee up a broader conversation and perhaps a hearing just on RICAP this year, given how much change is in that fund. And so I think if we could work together on that, Director, on when the GBA for RICAP might come out, and then I think maybe get into a hearing specifically on what are the levers of options we have to restore some of that funding, and if we do, what projects do we think we're putting back in, which might come out, et cetera. I think there might be an appetite for us to go down that path.
Happy to arrange that for you and look forward to that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Senator Murray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just jump in on this subject, and thank you, Senator Sebany, for bringing this up. I also want to put on your radar, Director, there is a specific building for that Community Care Alliance habitates on Mendon Road. Cumberland Street in Woonsocket, and I'd just like to get the status on that building as well. So if you could provide that information to us, that would be much appreciated. And I think also this does require a larger conversation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Happy to. Are there any other questions or comments for the Director at this point from members? Okay. All right, it does not appear so, Director. So if we could proceed through, I believe you're going to start talking technology.
Yes, I'm going to talk about technology specifically as it relates to the enterprise applications and the strategic plan we have for addressing this situation, which has been a finding in the auditor's report for pretty much for 5 years, but the situation is such that it's something needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And the reason for that is because nobody really considers the probability of something going wrong until they find out what the consequence of something going wrong. There are systems that we have that are more than 20 years old, and the people that we have to maintain them are aging out of our system. And while it was a good system when it was put in place, our accounts and control systems that handle our HR information systems and human capital management, payroll, and other applications are really aged, and they're prone to error and are causing great concern to us. And this is something that we intend to address in the near term. These functions are not anything sexy. It's not something that somebody can put their name on or cut a ribbon in front of, but they're absolutely vital to ensuring that the 50,000 transactions that are processed by our accounts and control group, the different HR applications that are made in terms of making sure people's payroll is correct, that these are done correctly. So this is something that we will be paying an awful lot of attention to over the next 12 to 24 months. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that to your attention because it is a strategic priority of ours, and we are intent on addressing these issues. This is just more of what I was just talking about. We have a situation where there's security risk and single points of failure associated with this, and I don't want to beat this into the ground. So, Robert, why don't we go ahead and move through to Article 2 for Joe? Unless anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to talk about.
Yeah,
and answer your
Director.
questions. at this
Yeah,
point.
Director, if actually I could jump in. I have just on the technology side, and I
Yeah.
fully understand the need related to these systems, and I know they're outdated and all that. And I think it's all the right direction for us to be moving into. I guess my question, elsewhere in the budget, there's a proposal related to DCYF and replacing their system. And we kind of go through this, process where a different department or agency puts forward replacing their operating system over time. Have we taken an across-state government look at what all of our information technology needs are and sort of, define out what our nirvana state is and then work backwards? I know from a lot of corporate entities, I think there was sort of a trend in IT where, we kind of had these monolith systems that we would build out, an application to do this and an application to do that. But in the structure that, a lot of IT can be built today, I know a lot of corporations are taking their technology in-house, beginning to build more of it internally and having systems talk to each other and connect, whether it be via standard API interfaces, et cetera. I'm wondering if there's if we had the opportunity to take a go big moment on technology, and especially given some of the resources we're going to have to potentially make that kind of a decision, have we done some of that groundwork, or should we do some of that groundwork to kind of take an across-state government view on what's our IT need, and on a 10-year basis maybe, and then back our way down into, what are the immediate decisions and the next decisions, et cetera, that we should be thinking about?
Mr. Chair, thanks for asking, because I think BJ is about to ready to jump through the screen. He's very excited. BJ Kumar is our Chief Information Officer, and he's responsible for all technology statewide. And he can tell you he's very thorough and has a very broad view on the technology needs and how we're going to fix things in the state. So, BJ, why don't you go ahead and comment for us, please? BJ, you're on mute, I believe. Can't hear you, BJ. BJ?
Yeah, we can see you, BJ, that you're not on mute here. But interesting, your audio is not coming through.
BJ, we got to do something about this technology.
Of course. That's, of course, the person it would happen to. You know how that would work. Poor guy. Maybe.
Joe, you want to take a stab at
Sure. I can provide a brief comment on the richest system compared to the ERP generally. The richest system at DCYF, that is something which, in relative terms, would be closer to an off-the-shelf product, a existing software product that is configured for state use, but it's not as custom configured in such a way as the ERP would be a comprehensive enterprise solution that may involve some off-the-shelf products, but I know that there is a significant amount more of planning that and integration across agencies that goes into that. And I think that BJ could provide a better comment on an inventory of state software applications and needs more generally.
Okay. I know BJ is trying to join back in. So why don't we do this? Why don't we head to Article 2, and then when BJ comes back and we get his audio, maybe we can revert back to some of the technology questions, if that's okay with the members. Senator Palmer, I know you had some questions. Were they related to technology or anything else you want to cover other than technology?
Yes, perfect timing. Just got out of the car, so hopefully my hopefully my card movement wasn't too erratic. So I have two questions. Following up on your question, Chairman. So with regards to the DCYF, the richer system, having spent a fair amount of time across HHS, there are, I'll just say, Director Kumar has some great folks. We're not going to pay people enough money to do the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
We're just not. It's not going to, and given the systems that are out there, it's basically building on what we already have. Obviously, they need to interface with the rest of the systems. I can't say how open they are or not from an API perspective, from an open systems architecture perspective, but all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I don't see us building any systems in-house of the nature of the richest system that DCYF has now. In the case of FAIR-App, DHDDH has for DD, amongst other systems. But we do need to look at that in a holistic fashion, Chairman. You're right on. And with regards to the, obviously we're going to spend this rescue money 4 times over. But clearly, for one-time things, capital investments, these are the kinds of things we should be fully investing in, whether it's the case of a paper time cards that we still have. And as we all probably just saw, Mr. Chairman, and committee, the report from the Auditor General that I have sitting right behind me that I refer to often, refer to very often, not too often, but very often, the number of system recommendations in there on page 2 or page 3, if they don't scream for IT, nothing does. So we, in some regards, what we need to look at, what we need to do, the report that came out last week or the week before clearly articulates that. I think we have a roadmap for addressing that. So just a comment for that. The other part I do want to talk about, Mr. Chairman, is going back to very good, Director. It's good to see that you knew where it was. No, just kidding. And I did talk to the Auditor General about it as well. Back to a comment that Senator Sebedy made earlier as it relates to DCAMP. So I have two questions for you, or a comment for you, Director, and one question. Having spent a lot of time with the DD folks across the state, and we'll address this when we have the DHDDH budget come before us. Yes, so last year took a hit with regards to some of the right cap money being shortchanged because of the use of the rainy day fund. But we will go, as part of the DHDDH budget this year, we will certainly look at the right cap. And I think when the committee sees what's there or what's not there, to the point that Senator Sebedy made, woefully inadequate. We're clearly not addressing some of the basic needs they have at some of these group homes, and even the case of congregator for DCYF with regards to generators, the people that need these kinds of support. So we need to look at that. But one last piece, Mr. Chairman, if I may. The question really comes about. So, Director Thorson, I don't know if anybody from DCAM is on the line here. Is there? No. Okay. I'll follow up with you, Director. And I've gotten some information from your organization already, so thank you. And the topic is Eleanor Slater Hospital and the fire marshal's report that came out this year. I'm doing a comparison and contrast with what was done last year and the year before. I don't know what it's going to tell us, but I do plan to look at that, just given the swirl and what's happening with the whole Eleanor Slater complex, Eleanor Slater Hospital system, not just the Embrano, but the entire system. So I think we need to look at that holistically from a DCAM perspective. And I don't know what it's going to say, but hopefully it's not something that's systemic across the inspections that are done in different areas and what we do with the results or not. So thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the winded time for me to.
That's okay, Senator. That's okay, Senator. Just while you have a moment, Senator Sosnowski, I know that you actually want to be, I believe, want to be recorded in the affirmative on the House Bill 6037.
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. So ordered.
Thank you.
And it does appear, BJ, appears you may have audio.
I believe so. Can you hear me?
That is wonderful. We can hear you. I don't know if you kind of recall my initial question. If you want to start with some thoughts there, and then we can kind of maybe delve into some of the issues Senator Palma brought up.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, if I could answer the Senator's question, please.
Sure.
Senator Palma. With respect to Eleanor Slater Hospital, there will be an opportunity to go into greater detail in this in another hearing, I'm sure, but I want to be responsive, and I didn't want this question to just slide by. I know that Senator DePalma wouldn't forget about it, but I just want to make sure we didn't roll past it. The governor has put over $64 million to address and invest in issues related to the campus up at Eleanor Slater Hospital. And as has been announced, the governor and his team have paused to reevaluate a plan before the end and expect to have a plan, an amended plan before the end of the session. He's just putting the pieces together now. With respect to the fire marshal's report, I can tell you that we have gone over this. DCAM has gone over it with me and with senior staff in the governor's office and with folks and both the secretary and DCAM. And we reviewed each of the different items. What's first and foremost that should be stated is that the patients appear not to be in imminent danger or any risk of fire, but there are quite a few issues that need to be addressed. There actually were 112 issues in the hospital, and of which over 30 have been addressed already, and the rest are expected to be addressed before the end of this month. So I wanted to give that heads up. Senator DePalma, I think, do you have a copy or do you need a copy of the report? Or if anybody else is interested in the report, I would be glad to provide it to them.
No, Director, I do have it. I reached out to, I always get it wrong, Carol Cornelison. Yeah. I had to forget how I say that. And she sent me that. I did ask for the prior ones as well because they're referenced, and she sent me those as well. I just want to do some compare and contrast, so I do have it. Thank you.
Sure. So I just want to make sure that you know that if you have a question or need information, I will do whatever I can to share it with you.
Much appreciated.
I hope that answers the question. So, BJ, do you want to go back to the enterprise application?
Absolutely. Thank you. So thank you for the question, and I apologize for the technical difficulty here. So I started with the state almost 4 years ago, July 2017. And since then, we have been focusing on people, process, and technology. We have built a lot of competencies which did not exist in the state prior to my arrival. We have tightened the IT governance process without increasing the budget for IT, for the people piece. We actually have done strategic hiring, and we are looking at agencies holistically. So I do have a Chief Information Security Officer, a head of agencies and applications who looks across the applications in a very strategic way. We do have a Chief of Infrastructure and Operations, and we have a finance person, and of course vendor management, contracts, and strategic sourcing, which looks at enterprise architecture-led procurement for all our applications and hardware. So with this people piece, improvement in process, including ITIL or service management, as well as being very innovative about what we do and creating a short-term and a long-term strategy for technology, we have been able to look across the board, across all the agencies, and invest in the right technology. So to answer your question, we did not have a strategic plan several years ago, as the director alluded to it. It has been in the audits for over 5 years. We completed the strategic plan several years ago. In fact, we wanted to start it last year, but because of the pandemic, we hope to start it this year. And not only the ERP strategic plan, but programs like Richest, which is for child welfare in DCYF, and several other applications, we handle these in a very strategic way. We have an application inventory. We have what we call a heat map, which lists all the application and when they should be retired or replaced. And also we have a short-term and a longer-term plan, as I mentioned. We do share this with the legislature. We have shared this with you. There is an Enterprise Technology Systems and Services report, which comes out every year. The application heat map, the application inventory, that is published every year. It's updated on a monthly basis. Along with that, I just wanted to add to it that the state has actually been the most moving state in terms of digitalization, which includes modernization as well, from 2018 to 2020. So that is the summary. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, BJ, and I think if you're open to it, I think when we come back to discuss the RICAP hearing in general, it might make sense for us to also include, a review of that overall strategic plan when we do the RICAP hearing, and they may kind of fit together a little bit, but I think it would be helpful for us to get an understanding of, where do we see the state's, IT, strategic plan going? What are the DCYF system is now, the, enterprise HR and payroll systems are now, I get that, but what's next? What's coming next? What are those next big systems that we have to be thinking about that are on the roadmap? And I think my broader question is there any way that we can be thinking about those things in tandem, right? Is there anything that is there opportunity for cross collaboration between departments on that? Is there opportunity to think through, building out an application that maybe does 3 different things? Or I'm trying to find some way there around if we did have the capital to be able to make some investments in the next couple of years. What's the plan that we'd be investing in if we wanted to accelerate some of that work, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. So we do have a plan on that, and in fact, as part of this American Rescue Plan, we have been strategically working with all the agencies and looking across them for synergies, and we do have some requests for capital money across the agencies as well.
Okay. So, Director Thorson, and if it's okay with you, I think maybe that makes sense for, as we start planning out maybe a May hearing on both RICAP and a technology, strategic update. It might make a good sense to put those 2 together.
Actually, if I could, Mr. Chairman, there's going to be some activity on something called Rhode Island 2030 coming up, and I think it's very exciting. It's basically something that we're developing as a 10-year plan, and the governor will be talking more about this going forward. And I don't mean to jump a prize or anything like this, but in essence, what it's going to involve is an effort for outside stakeholders in Rhode Island to find out what they think the state should look like in 10 years, and also we're just initiating an effort to talk about a statewide strategic government plan for the next 10 years and what government will look like 10 years from now. And that's a process that's just starting. We just organized a committee last week, and we actually have meetings on Sundays to go over this. And so you'll be hearing a lot more about this. And so I'm thinking even bigger than your suggestion. We certainly will address your questions, but if you're interested, we have even bigger thoughts that we'd like to share because we want your feedback as well. So we'll be back to you on that.
Okay. All right. We can do some more planning on that and figure out the best way to approach it.
Great.
Planning's good.
Senator 70, do you have a question? Senator 70?
Well, I guess my questions can wait until we actually delve into the strategic plan and all that. I'm interested in things like your decision process for making stuff as opposed to just purchasing off-the-shelf turnkey applications. In some of these areas with HR, timekeeping, all that stuff, there have been effective commercial applications available to purchase for, going on 20 years now. And, the whole thing, like, Senator Palmer mentioned paper timesheets, and I don't recall a time, and I'm old, I don't recall a time when I filled out a paper timesheet, so, yeah, well, it's things like that where, there's a lot of turnkey off-the-shelf stuff that seems to do the job for industry. So my question, I guess, is what are we doing with that?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. So the enterprise ERP strategy, which has been delivered, it is also on our website, and it's a public document. And that talks about leveraging commercial off-the-shelf and not building ERP. So there are actually, it's even smaller than that. It's a list of 5 vendors who are used across the United States, across the 50 states, across public sector. So we are going to be looking at selecting one of those providers for our ERP. So, and again, this includes Oracle, Infor, Workday, SAP, and of course CGI. That is the 5 vendors. And we will be actually selecting one of those, and we will be implementing that. And the entire financials for that and the plan is part of the strategic plan which has been delivered. We hope to deliver the request for proposal this year. And to your point, we do not want to build monolithic systems. We are not in the building of building software. We're not in the business of building software. We want to buy commercial off-the-shelf as much as possible. And again, when we talk about the branch management system, you will hear more of that. That is our strategy.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee before we move on to Article 2? Okay, hearing none. Director, let's go to Article 2.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and have Joe take this.
Great. I'm glad to take this. Director Thorson, Chairman, thank you. Before we hop into Article 2, I just want to make sure we address the agenda item on the repayment of RICAP, Article 1, Section 5, and depart from the slide deck for a moment. As you're aware, following a withdrawal from the State Budget Reserve and Cash Stabilization Account, the amount of funds flowing to RICAP are reduced. And therefore, the general laws require us to make an extra transfer to RICAP in the year following a transfer from the rainy day fund. Expressed in simpler terms, when we make a withdrawal from the rainy day fund, the mechanism for paying it back is actually paying back RICAP, the state's pay-as-you-go capital plan fund. Following the withdrawal of the $120 million from the rainy day fund in fiscal 20, the budget as enacted extended the repayment of RICAP beyond the 1 year that the general laws would have required to repay RICAP in the amount of $90 million in fiscal 21 and the remaining $30 million in fiscal 22. When we were faced with balancing the governor's recommended budget, we had a big deficit to close, and we looked for revenue and expenditure options that would have minimal impact on government services, operations, minimal impact on taxpayers, and ultimately what the governor recommended was repaying RICAP at $7.5 million in fiscal 21, $42.5 million in fiscal 22, and then the remaining $70 million in fiscal 23. So what this did was it deferred $70 million of RICAP repayment into the year beyond the budget year, fiscal 23. So it had $70 million of deficit closing power there. And it did extend the repayment of RICAP by 1 year. So the justification as to why we made this decision is that many capital projects had already been delayed, partially due to the pandemic, but significantly due to the fact that we were operating without an enacted budget for the first 6 months of the year. Given that delay, the reduction in the transfer to RICAP had little additional practical impact in terms of delaying projects. That delay had already been experienced. And furthermore, this shift really is just shifting RICAP payments within the 5-year plan. It's not actually reducing the total planned capital expenditures within the 5-year RICAP plan. Now, as you mentioned, certainly it would be possible to transfer this amount more quickly, to repay the RICAP, make the RICAP repayment more quickly. But in the midst of the constrained choices that we were facing in the budget development, in our budget development process in January, February, March, this was a solution that was available to us in that constrained time, and something that would accommodate our RICAP plan as it existed. So that was our justification there. I'm glad to pause for a moment if this is something that's of interest to the committee, Chairman.
Yeah, sure. Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Chairman. Joe, let's go back. The numbers you just mentioned aren't the numbers I remember. Let me just say what I thought I remembered from the FY21 budget that we passed last year, because we originally borrowed $120 million. And of that 120, 60 really was to pay the Ocean State Hospital difference because we couldn't bill for the IMD mix. But I thought, please correct me, Joe, weren't we paying back 90 million of the 120 first?
Yes, correct. So it would be 90 million in fiscal 21 and 30 million in fiscal 22. That was what was in the enacted budget. And then what's in the governor's recommended budget was 7.5 million in fiscal 21, $42.5 million in fiscal 22, and then, if I'm doing the math correctly, that should be the additional $70 million deferred to fiscal 23.
So we went from 90 to how much? 7.5?
Yes, so instead of 90-30, it went to 7.5, 42.5, and 70. So it's the same amount of money paid back, but instead of 2 years, it's 3 years.
No, I appreciate that piece, but that's night and day. We're not talking 75 1 year, 80 1 year, instead of that 75 and 5 to the next. We're talking order of magnitude. 90 back to 7.5, and then 40, and then 70.
And as I said, one of the things, so typically there is a balance in the RICAP fund. So the revenues into the fund, there is an accumulated carry forward balance in the fund. So the revenues do not equal expenditures in any given year necessarily. So that provides some wiggle room. And then additionally, the delay of the budget enactment meant that many projects were delayed. We were at one point only proceeding on projects that had encumbrances or that had a life or health or safety impact. So there was virtually an effective pause on capital expenditures for the first half of this year, and that also made this possible.
No, I don't want to belabor. I know, as the chairman said, that hearing will be a long hearing, I suspect. But it's the decision that the executive branch made that's night and day, basically. I mean, we committed back when we passed the budget. I forgot when it was now. It seems like they're all strung together, basically, because they did. What did we do? Did we do it in December or September? I don't remember what it was now. Yeah, FY21 budget got passed in December, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from December to January, we went from 90 to 7.5. I'm not certain what changed in that 1 month, Joe. That gave us the wherewithal to say we were 90 in December. Fast forward to January, because the budget's being put together in January, and if we didn't have a change of administration, the budget would have been due. Well, I guess it was still. I think Governor Raimondo asked for an extension anyway, which was the right thing to do. So when that time comes, let's have that discussion about. We want to drill down a little more how we went from 90 in 1 month, and within a period of 30 days later, we went to 7.5. So, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Acosta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I have a question about the figures, I guess. So if you wanted to add a year, why not say make it 40 million spread across 3 rather than go 7.5, 42.5, and then 70? And related to that, this is a year. Well, so when this budget was drafted, it was before we knew what the federal government was going to do. Now that we know now that we have somewhat of a better picture of what we can and can't use federal funds for, is it fiscally responsible to have the biggest part of this payment go out 2 years rather than have it go in now when we can use some of that federal fund to cover some of these other sources rather than say we're going to have to figure out a way to find some million 2 years from now?
So let me, I guess, address this in pieces. So first of all, is it possible, if I understand your question correctly, is it possible for us to maybe do something like you mentioned, a 40-40-40 as opposed to the 7.5, 42.5, 70. I think in general, the answer would be yes. There would be other repayment arrangements that would work just fine. We're projecting that the fund would hit a low point in fiscal 22. So we could change the payment to be more front-loaded or more back-loaded, but still achieve the savings in fiscal 21 and 22. At the time when we were facing much more uncertainty and volatility than we are now, it was a safer or more conservative option in terms of keeping cash available for potential current needs to defer it into 22. So reduce it rather dramatically to $7.5 million in 21, as opposed to something where it would maybe be, I guess we could have done 25. And Joe, if I can, would have accomplished something similar.
Yeah, and Joe, if I can jump in here, I mean, I think in fairness to the administration, the cards that are now on the table were not cards that were present at the time they put this together. And, you know, at the end of the day, we will have, you know, we will be fully repaying the rainy day fund, right?
Yes.
And restoring RICAP and going back to our normal conversation about that. So, but in fairness, at the time, the options that the assembly will have were not available to the administration when they had to sort of put this together.
Correct. Yep. And there is some flexibility even within this proposal, but that is what the decision we came to at the time. And then with respect to are these funds available for other priorities, we have legal requirements to fund to keep it within capital projects. So the RICAP is limited to capital, so it's not as if it could be used for anything. But in terms of trade-offs there, we'd have to be looking at trade-offs between RICAP projects.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee before we proceed to Article 2? Okay. All right, hearing none. Please proceed.
So moving on to provisions within Article 2, the next item that I'd like to discuss relates to grants management. So there are two components to the grants management discussion. The first is a restricted receipts arrangement recommended in the governor's budget to help recover costs related to grants management. And related to that is also a departmental priority to pursue a grants management IT solution. I'm ready for the next slide.
So before you go off that, Joe, I guess a question for maybe you and Director Thorson. I know related to, so there's, you know, one, I think, you know, having better processes around federal grants management is important and better technology around that. I know it was very cumbersome for OMB to manage the original CARES Act dollars that have come in. And, you know, just since then, we've now had the December 2020 stimulus, the rescue plan stimulus that we're largely gaining more information on. I know that DOA had sent out a solicitation for proposals from departments, agencies, I think the universities as well, around ideas. And I know that I think the goal there was to sort of collate those back and share them with us prior to the April break. And I know we haven't seen them yet, so I wanted to ask kind of, what's the status of sort of collating that information to kind of share what some of the ideas have been so far? Joe or Director, I'm not sure if you heard me there.
Do you want me to take this, Director? You're on mute. So, Senator, I'm Dorothy Pascal. I head up the Pandemic Recovery Office, which has the Grant Management Office as part of it. I am not aware of the survey that you're speaking about, but if I could catch you offline and you can give me some details, I'd be happy to feed that back to this body with some answers.
There was a memo from Director Thorson that went to all departments and agencies, so we can.
I'll grab it and I'll get you your answers.
All right, we can come back to it maybe when the director gets audio.
Chairman, if I may real quick.
Senator?
we want, Dottie's the real deal. We want her to do what she's doing here and then get back to where she was before, because we need her back to where she was. So, not that she's not gonna do a great job here, but, we need her back.
Okay, all right. Joe, we'll come back to that when Director Thorson maybe gets some audio.
Sure. I'm glad to describe briefly the restricted receipt account,
Sure.
if you please. Specifically what's proposed in Article 2, Section 4 is the creation of a restricted receipt account. This would function similarly to the Auditor General's single audit recovery account, where a small fraction of a percent is assessed on federal grants statewide, and that's used to help recover some of the costs of grants management in the Office of Accounts and Control. Right now, there's 4 FTE in that office, and the budget assumes that half of their costs would be recoverable in this restricted receipt account in fiscal 22. Also, the department is taking steps to implement a grants management system, an IT solution. Included in the governor's recommended budget was $2 million of federal funds, CRF, to help fund the startup costs. Additionally, we envision that federal indirect cost recovery funds could be applied to some of the startup and development costs. In the very long run, very long run as in the next couple of years as the system is developed, it's possible that the restricted receipt account could fund some of the ongoing maintenance and operations for the system. But we would assume that there'd be, as I mentioned, the $2 million of CRF, and possibly also indirect cost recovery funds used to help pay the startup costs for this.
Mr. Chair,
Director.
I figured it out.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, yes, in fact, I did send out an email to all state agency heads and university presidents and so forth roughly a month ago, and the idea was to get a solicitation of worthy projects, and this fits into our strategic planning as well. But the notion is that trying to figure out what might be worthwhile spending federal monies on. And a number of proposals came back. The number was dozens of proposals. And we are meeting, the governor has gone through each one and is meeting with us before the end of this week to go through it so that we can distill this down into ideas. We've already had some preliminary ideas, and they're very nascent, so I don't know that he's ready to share, but he will be very, very soon.
Okay.
And as you may have heard, the guidance from the federal treasury is due to come out. We're expecting that next week on the 10th, that will more definitively state what the funds will and will not be eligible for going forward. So we're expecting that next Monday. So I expect that you will have much more information by midweek to late next week, after we incorporate all the information that we have and what we're going through, and what information we get from the Treasury.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Director. And I think, from our perspective, I think obviously our primary focus right now is the Revenue and Estimating Conference, and ensuring that we can work on solving this year's operational budget that we have to by the end of June here. But I think, soon after that, or, it's, in the back of our minds as we're sort of obviously solving the operational budget, we will be taking a look at, what federal resources are available and that we choose to use at this point versus, what we defer. And I think, certainly my hope is that we can use as little of the federal resources as possible and really preserve as much of it for future investments. And I know that, we will be, very interested to see some of those recommendations. And I know we're going to have to work out, what's the formal process for them to come to us, for us to determine, how we're going to handle the appropriations process related to those ideas. I know there's outside entities as well, like RIPEC and others formulating ideas. And so we're going to have to work on what the process is for the legislature to kind of, get the governor's recommendations, get RIPAC's recommendations, and feedback from the public across the board to ultimately be able to figure out how we want to appropriate those funds. So thanks for that update, and I know we're going to continue to talk about it often here going forward.
Yeah, and I know, Mr. Chair, I know that the governor has had conversations with leadership about this. He's it's not a deep, dark secret, so I know he's keeping them informed.
Yep. Senator Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with your comments. I think it is important for us to have a process of appropriation and work together with the administration. And Director, in anticipation of the recommendations next week, selfishly, I like to just put in the radar, which I know is in the radar of the governor, investment to education as a priority, as we have had a lot of loss of learning due to COVID-19, and obviously equity when it comes to those investments in education is always welcome. So I just want to say thank you for the update. I concur with the comments of the chairman, and education is always going to be a good investment for the state and for the future of the state. So thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee before we go to slide 14? Okay. Hearing none. Slide 14.
And for slide 14, I'd like to introduce Dan Orgel, who's a chief analyst in the budget office, to talk about control of state spending, some appropriations matters, and some restricted receipt matters.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm just going to do a quick microphone check. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great. So thanks very much for the opportunity to testify here tonight on Article 2, Sections 5 and 6. Article 2, Section 5 makes some significant substantive modifications to a previous Article 2, Section 5, in fact, which was Article 2, Section 5 of the FY 2020 Appropriations Act, promulgated by the 2019 General Assembly. There was some rather significant new restrictions placed on state spending, specifically in the event of a quarterly report evidencing a deficit, a general revenue deficit, for any agency. That agency was then placed under several restrictions, most notably that the state controller could not authorize payments for additional staff contract or purchases that exceeded the current appropriation levels. So essentially what happened was we, in response to that change, promulgated a policy. It's the OMB Budgetary Control Policy, whereby agencies who are evidencing a deficit in the most recently published quarterly report, that is the quarterly report published by the Budget Office, are put under enhanced OMB oversight, and they are not permitted to spend for additional staff contracts or purchases that are not related or necessitated by immediate health and safety. One of the challenges that occurred in promulgating this policy, constructing it, was some interpretive issues that came up with respect to the statutory language enacted at the time. And this new Article 2, Section 5 makes some revisions there that we hope are basically in comportment with the budgetary control policy and reflect pragmatic practice. For one, the original Article 2, Section 5 language, modifying 35.324, did not make mention of the source of funds. As you know, there are appropriations for state general revenues, federal funds, restricted receipts, other funds throughout the Appropriations Act. So the original Article 2 was actually silent on that, even though the quarterly report is the trigger for enhanced oversight and is generally a report on the status of the general revenue balance of the specific agency. So the first major change we're making to this language is to specify agency-wide general revenue appropriations. So the source of funds and the fact that it's agency-wide, it's the bottom line general revenue appropriation for the agency, that if an agency is reporting, or we are reporting a quarterly report in excess of that amount, that bottom line general revenue amount, that is what triggers enhanced oversight, and that is what triggers the new statutory language that was contained in Article 2 of the 2020 Appropriations Act. We also have made some modifications that align with the budgetary control policy with respect to corrective action plans. Current law and law that existed prior to the 2019 General Assembly's changes to this portion of Title 35 required agencies within 30 days of discovering these overages to submit corrective action plans. So for years now, we've been requiring corrective action plans within 30 days of the budget office's quarterly report, which is 45 days after the close of the quarter. And generally agencies have complied with those. In the event, however, that a spending that is for additional staff contracts or purchases is required in order to effect certain provisions of a corrective action plan, those would also be allowable. Moreover, we have modified to some extent the strictures under which the state controller would not be able to authorize a payment, would disallow a payment in the event that an agency is reporting a deficit. We had a frame of reference issue to some extent with respect to the language that was in existing statute, so we have modified it. So it is not simply just immediate health and safety needs that would facilitate an allowance of payment for an agency reporting a deficit. It would also be it would be geared toward the previous fiscal year's service levels rather than immediate health and safety necessarily, although that would still be an allowance. So we've added the language beyond service levels provided in the previous fiscal year. So I guess a good example of that would be one agency such as DCYF that was placed under enhanced oversight pursuant to Article 2. They might have a contract that technically did not meet the budgetary control policy's definition of immediate health and safety, or the necessitation of immediate health and safety. However, it was an ongoing contract that they had been funding, and it was for not anything additional. It was just service levels that had been provided in the past. So not necessarily technically in aid of immediate health and safety. Human life was not necessarily compromised if they did not make this expenditure, but it was in line with prior authorizations from previous fiscal years. So we've added that language. The controller is not authorized to make payments, however, for one-time payments for equipment and supplies. Those would be disallowed. And just to recapitulate, if it was consistent with an approved agency corrective action plan or something that could demonstrably forestall an increase to the agency deficit that's already being reported. I know that's a significant amount of changes, so I apologize for being slightly long-winded. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. Hearing none. Page 15.
Perfect. Thank you. So Section 6 of Article 2 also contains some new language. The first thing we are proposing is a definition within Title 35 itself of appropriation. Somewhat ironically to, I think, a lot of practitioners in public finance, outside of Article 1, Section 2, which almost self-referentially defines what an appropriation is, there's no real go-to or statutory definition of appropriation. So we were trying to fix that oversight, and we actually have a clause that defines an appropriation as an enactment by the General Assembly authorizing withdrawal of money from the state treasury. What I would like to point, we also specify in the same clause that other General Assembly enactments are not necessarily appropriations. And I would like to be very, very clear, this is in no way intended to subvert the legislative authority over the intent of appropriations or the purpose of appropriations. All we are doing here with this language is asserting the primacy of the Appropriations Act itself over other sections of law that may require something to be funded, that may require a rate increase, for example. Home and community-based services is a good example. There's now a annual rate increase. We've had on the books hospital rate increases for years that are statutory and required by statute. However, we are asserting that those are not, strictly speaking, appropriations. An appropriation is contained in Article 1, Section 1 of the Appropriations Act, Section of the Internal Service Funds, which are a different section, and those are the actual bona fide appropriations. Appropriations, or I should say, appropriations cannot be defined as anything outside of that legislative vehicle. So I just want to thank you for letting me take a little bit of time to clarify that, because I think there has been a little bit of confusion since we submitted that particular article back in March. We also have a section within Section 6 that deems general revenue appropriated even if not contained in the prevailing Article 1 of the Appropriations Act, which would deem it allowable for agencies to spend appropriations that are not technically yet appropriated. So there's hence the term deemed appropriated. And we have 3 conditions where this could be met. One is to comply with a court order. The second, and obviously of most recent interest, I would argue, is to respond to a declared state of emergency. In point of fact, the Rhode Island Emergency Management Act and the funding provisions set forth therein do actually not allow for additional general revenues to be deemed appropriated in the event of a declared state of emergency. They actually only allow the reallocation of existing appropriations. So this would remedy that issue. And then lastly, sort of codifying what has been past practice for many years, but never actually placed in statute, is programs subject to the caseload estimating conference. That would be the medical assistance or Medicaid program at EOHHS, and various programs of cash assistance, such as the Rhode Island Works program, Child Care Assistance program, covered under the CEC, General Public Assistance, some other cash assistance programs within DHS. So what that would essentially do is, if you have some sort of very large increase for whatever exogenous reason, caseload or otherwise, mid-year, and it is adopted as part of the as part of the conferee's consensus estimates, either in November or May, or any conference that might be called in between those two, those will supersede appropriations contained in the prevailing Appropriations Act, Article 1, Section 1. By assent, the House, Senate, and Budget Office, or OMB, have assented to those, and those are generally considered sort of the new prevailing appropriations, even though, due to the static nature of the appropriations process, tends to happen once a year. Those are not accommodated until a year end within the Appropriations Acts, both the Supplemental Act and the Budget Year Act.
Okay. So a few questions
here.
There
for questions?
Yep, a few questions.
On to the next part of the slide?
No, a few questions here. So I think I guess, one of the questions that's come up several times in sort of our review of these articles has been, we're not aware of there being any issue with having the resources available previously under this. I mean, I'll actually ask a question today. What pot of money does the governor plan to give out $25 gift cards from? And what authority
So that is going to come from the Small Business Investment Fund under the CARES Act.
And is that fund federal money?
Yes, it is.
And isn't there a state statute that says federal funds have to be appropriated by the General Assembly?
I believe so.
So should I be expecting, before I read about it in Boston Globe, that we're giving out $25 gift cards, should I be expecting a proposal from the governor to come for the Assembly to pass an Appropriations Act?
I don't have an answer for that. Joe? Ken?
Director, if you'd like to comment on the governance process over federal funds, or else we can get back to the committee on that.
Well, we can talk about process, but I think what we're being asked about is legal, and I'm hesitant to do that without legal.
All right, so if you could follow up with us, I would appreciate that. I guess where that's coming from related to this is, I guess, the concern that we've had in reviewing this article related to the specific items here is it doesn't appear that to any of us, and I'm totally open to hearing a different school of argument, but that there's been any issue with the government being able to operate during a state of emergency. I think the legislature, in many ways, has been very, lenient in this regard, especially as we went through COVID last year, and it was a new, space for all of us to be operating in. I guess I just don't understand what's driving the true need for this, and not only the emergency, but also, to comply with our court order. To comply with a court order, there could be many ways to comply with a court order, all that have different ways to comply with that order, all that have different costs to comply with that order, that I'm concerned that the legislature would be giving up its role, its constitutional role, in being able to appropriate funds if there happened to be a court order on something. So I guess between all of these, I guess there doesn't appear to be a compelling case that at least we can understand as to why we would expand, executive authority here and basically remove the legislature from some of this appropriation process.
What problem is this?
Senator Seveni's question they just asked was what problem is this fixing? Was his question as a summary.
I think to some extent, Mr. Chairman, it's solving some statutory deficiencies that we saw. I don't believe the intent here was necessarily to circumvent the appropriations process in any way. Certainly with respect to the declared state of emergency, the Disaster Emergency Funding Board, which is, of course, composed of the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, and the chairpersons of the finance committees, is still viable. However, that statute itself does not necessarily allow it does not necessarily allow additional appropriations of general revenue to be deemed appropriated in the event of a declared state of emergency. So a strict reading of the law, and I am not an attorney, so I will make that disclaimer immediately. However, in that instance, I think both the administration and the legislature might be hamstrung in that regard should they not be able to make supplemental appropriations mid-year.
Yeah.
With respect to
and again, I guess the legal question, right? So if there are laws in the books during a state of emergency, we saw the sweeping authority that the Rhode Island Constitution allows the governor to waive statutes that are on the books under the executive authority that they have during an emergency. And it gives the legislature the opportunity to, overturn any of those executive orders if we so chose. I guess now, some of these statutes, particularly the one that I mentioned earlier around federal funds, were not waived, to my knowledge, during the emergency period, which they probably should have been in hindsight. But in any future emergency or any future situation like this where there was a true emergency, statutes can be suspended by the executive, and that was specifically chosen not to happen in this last emergency. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say to the administration on this one, I think there, certainly needs to be a stronger argument made, to this committee, and I know, to others as well. Around why to Senator Seveni's point, what's the problem we're fixing? What's the practical reality of something we've actually had a problem doing or had a problem governing, frankly, between the two branches that we're trying to solve with this? And I know some of it's legal and you may not want to engage on that topic, which is fine. But I would, if it's something that the administration does want to see moving forward, I think, it would behoove the administration to make the case.
Chairman?
Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Chairman. I might have missed your question, so if I reiterate your question you already made, please, please just say we already talked to that. So, Dan, let's talk to court order. What specifically are you thinking about?
I don't know that there was any specific court order in mind when this was drafted.
Well, let me just interrupt you if I can. We put things down because is this the DD court order? Is the DCYF court order consent decree? This is something.
I think both of those were certainly taken into consideration when we decided to make this change. It also seemed just within the realm of reasonableness and prudence. We do have deemed appropriations for restricted receipts. We have no such statutory language for general revenues. And again, I don't necessarily think this was designed in.
But we put, sorry to interrupt you, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you, Dan, but I did. But we put it down as a bullet on a page, as an example, example 4, court order, state of emergency. So are we thinking about the DD consent decree, which I'm familiar with, intimately familiar with, or some other court order?
Again, no. I think those certainly came to mind and were probably top of mind when we decided to include this as a provision of this article of this new statutory language.
Going back to the chairman's question then, with regards to why would this need to be done out of cycle? I assume that's why you need this, right?
Out of cycle.
You're saying you need authority outside of the budgetary process.
I would claim it might be.
Well, that's what
budgetary. I mean, this nature of appropriations is fairly static. I think we can agree on that. So there are oftentimes issues that come up throughout the year. Consent decree is probably a great example. There are other examples. State of emergency, obviously.
Okay,
I do defer. I will concede that the constitutional provisions could likely trump that particular recommended.
Yeah, let me jump in on the court order consent decree stuff. That's pretty much part of the budgetary process. With regards to the last one, financing programs subject to the caseload estimating conference. The example of that is?
That would be, so the caseload conference, as we know, is a very circumscribed process. It does not take in all caseload programs in the state, much to the chagrin of some. And I can sympathize with that. It is circumscribed wholly to the medical assistance program of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, which we call Rhode Island Medicaid, even though there are Medicaid finance programs elsewhere in ancillary human services agencies, and I mean ancillary Medicaid.
No, by the way, Dan, you must have read my language. By the way, folks, I did not talk to Dan ahead of time. The bill that I've had for 6 years now is exactly that. So, yeah, we can do that one. No, just kidding. But I think it's Dan, looking at these, I'm not saying I'd be very supportive of any of these, given that.
Well,
none of these in my 13 years have come to play, with the exception of the declared state of emergency. And as the chairman indicates, the governor's been able to execute that accomplish that via executive orders. And as the chairman, I think the director, Thorson, yourself indicated earlier, Joe indicated earlier, with the Senate President, the Speaker, the chairs of the committee, et cetera, and the governor. Okay.
Points taken, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Senator. Are there other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. I believe we are on. I lost my spot.
I will go to the second portion of the slide, 16. Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So I believe this will be hopefully a slightly more straightforward portion of my presentation. This are the annual additions. This is very much a perennial statutory change to Title 35, and this involves the 10% indirect cost recovery assessment on restricted receipt accounts. As you know, the state maintains a significant number of restricted receipt accounts. some of which are exempt from the statutory provision providing for a 10% indirect cost recovery for overhead expenditures essentially attributable to maintaining those accounts. This particular budget, the FY22 budget, is proposing several new restricted receipt accounts, and the accounts you see below, the second portion of the slide, are those that we are proposing to exempt from the indirect cost recovery. So this would be an addition to the standard Title 35 exemptions for those accounts. I can go through them one by one, if you please, or just pause for questions.
I think we're good there.
Great. Next part of Section 6 of Article 2 is new statutory language that would grant the state budget officer the discretion to establish restricted receipts under certain scenarios. As you know, by legislative convention, restricted receipt accounts, and it dates back, I believe, to the early 90s, restricted receipt accounts are generally only established if and when the legislature promulgates and enacts language authorizing their creation, so often throughout Title 35 or wherever programmatically appropriate in the general laws, you will see there is hereby created a restricted receipt account within the general fund of the state for XYZ purpose. This is established convention. There is statutory backing for it, although it's not completely explicit, but that has been the convention and the practice for decades at this point. However, the State Budget Office often is notified by agencies of certain receipts or certain arrangements that are, according to general accepted accounting principles and the controller, best classified as a restricted receipt. But however, absent the legislative language to approve that, we cannot necessarily set them up. We can set them up in the out year and propose financing, but if an agency receives a foundation grant, for example, an Urban Institute or Ford Foundation grant, mid-year, and it's 6 months out from appropriations, and that grant is contingent upon expenditure in that year, technically it is very difficult, even though that is a bona fide use of a restricted receipt account, it is very difficult to set that up because we don't have the pre-existing statutory authority to do so. So in that instance, we are requesting that the state budget officer be given the ability to set those up for current year use. We would, of course, include those in the Appropriations Act with the correct expenditure recommendations, but it would forestall or at least obviate the problem or the need to wait until we received an appropriation to actually begin using them. And we've created several different classes of these types of restricted receipt accounts that could be created at the discretion of the budget officer. One is what I just mentioned, the sort of 501c3 organizations, foundation grants, for example, privately donated funds is another good example. So those types of donated funds and or funds from nonprofits. Also multi-state settlement proceeds, such as a good example would be very recently the McKinsey opioid settlement. That is a restricted receipt account. We have proposed its establishment in the Revised Appropriations Act and in the 2022 Appropriations Act, but technically there's no authority at this point, no legislative authority for it. Also, interstate agencies or contracts or memoranda of agreement subject to specific and time-limited purpose. This is where you might have, for an example, the Department of Labor and Training might have a memorandum of agreement with the Mississippi Department of Employment Security. This is one example that arose very recently. There would be a restricted receipt account for funds due to the state, due to DLT, to reimburse them for various costs. But right now, that restricted account under current conventions could not be set up. So this is I would say, a small island of restricted accounts that could be created at the discretion of the budget officer in consultation with the state controller. The second bullet is the second portion of this specific section of Section 6, Article 2, is a little bit more arcane, I would say. And it stems from some findings from the Office of the Auditor General. I would say a little over a year now, that certain escrow liability accounts in the state chart of accounts were better classified as restricted receipt accounts. Several of these conversions were authorized actually in the so-called skinny FY21 final enacted budget, but the clause or the I would say the condition of for 2021 only was utilized in the language, and this would just extend that indefinitely as more of these escrow liability accounts are uncovered, and the Auditor General and the State Controller, with the consent of the Auditor General, chose to convert these. So thus far I have about 10 on the books, stemming from the 2021 authorizations. There probably won't be many more because it was a fairly exhaustive search mission on the part of the Auditor General and the State Controller, but in the event that there are, this would just give the budget officer the latitude to create those within the chart of accounts. And I can explain a little bit more of what an escrow liability account is. It's kind of a redundancy. An escrow account or an escrow liability account is essentially a liability account that's established to account for funds for which the state is fiduciary on behalf of a third party. A good example of this might be in DHS in the Office of Child Support Enforcement. So non-custodial parents will pay into that account, and then the state will disperse those to the custodial parents for whom they are attributable to. That is housed in an escrow liability account, because we are holding funds as a fiduciary for a third party, this time, in this instance, being the custodial parent. SNAP recoveries are another good example. We retain some of the SNAP recoveries that we receive, but not all of them. So some portion has to be remitted back to the federal government. We use an escrow liability account for that. So we are third-party fiduciary to the federal government in that case. But there were some, just through historical accretion over time, there were some escrow accounts, also sometimes called balance sheet accounts, that were set up that actually were not of that type, where in fact it was state money attributable to a specific agency that could be used by that agency. So those were converted. So a little more arcane than the first one, but that is that provision. Happy to take questions on either one.
Any questions or comments from members of the committee? All right, hearing none. All right, I think we're ready to move to the pandemic management section here. Mr. Dottie, is this you leading this?
Yeah, I got it. I'm going to introduce Dottie here in a second. But I think it's important to note, and we're going to pivot. I know that some of the material we're dealing with here is a heavy lift, but you guys have proven time and again you can handle it.
We're good, we promise.
Okay. So I just want to pivot here a little bit and talk a little bit about pivot management from a practical point of view. And it's important to note that the coordination of DOA, as I mentioned at the top, was basically we service and provide services to almost every other agency in state government. And really pandemic recovery, it was pandemic management, now it's becoming pandemic recovery, is at the forefront of everybody's mind. And specifically budget and the PRO, which Dottie heads. And she'll talk a little bit in a minute. But I wanted to let you know that we have done quite a bit of coordination with RIDO and RIEMA on logistics support and communications. And for things like initiation of the demobilization of the convention center alternate hospital site. And we will likewise be working with something called the Emergency Readiness Task Force in demobilizing and figuring out how we can recover and stand down some of our emergency operations to effect a smooth transition to a more normal circumstance. It also includes looking at ways to bring people back in a sensible way into the office. And we're in the process of engaging with our different agencies to talk about how best to do that. So there's been a lot of interagency collaboration, and I think you'd be happy to know that DOA is working with all the agencies in a way that we haven't before, and we've learned, we've forged different relationships, and I think it's been beneficial in terms of state government and governance cohesiveness as we've gone through this experience together. And lastly, I should know that, I let you know that we're doing things to help each other out, including loaning employees to the small business programs. Some of DOA's employees, one from DCAM, one from HSRI, and actually one from the executive office here are helping Commerce execute the small business program currently, and likewise coordinated with DOR in the fall when I was in DOR. So it's been a real effort, and very pleased with the way that we have come together, and we intend to keep that momentum as we move forward into the future. And with Dottie's guidance, we're going to have some decisions to make, and I wanted you to know that there is a framework for making those decisions, and Dottie's going to talk a little bit more about that on page 19.
Thank you, Director. And on the slide in front of you, you'll see the information that is the graphic from our transparency.ri.gov/COVID-19 website. And these funds that you see in front of you represent the amounts associated with the Corona relief dollars and the federal grants. They do not account for the $2 million before Corona relief that was under the authority of the state, and the soon to be nearly $4 billion coming from the American Rescue Plan Act. Prior to the COVID money, we had, under our authority, 1,500 awards across 25 federal agencies, totaling over $25 million. The pandemic hit, and we got an additional $300 million directly into state agencies. The CARES Act gave us nearly $2 billion, and then we have an additional, federal funding coming in, which will get us roughly to over $7.8 billion to be spent for recovery, pandemic, and rebuilding. And this does not include the $3 billion of Medicaid money that we also oversee within our Medicaid unit. So the state has basically doubled the inventory and more than doubled the reporting requirements to our federal partners, with the same level of staffing that we've had back from 2018 and 2019. The transparency portal currently shows in front of you the expenditures through April 2nd, 2021, and they total $1.3 billion. And I can read them out to you if you'd like. Business and economic support is a little over $390 million. The COVID health response is in excess of $330 million. The state government response is in excess of $285 million. The municipal support is in excess of $135 million. And the child care and education support stands at over $130 million. Does anybody have any questions for me about this information?
Yeah, I guess, Dottie, I know that, we've been tracking, and we did through the not even supplemental budget, the budget we passed in December. We used the latest expenditures from this that still had a series of forecasted dollars in there. Do we know from the original CARES Act money that we had been tracking all of last year, how much has still not actually been spent? And what's it? And so they're spent, they're sort of encumbered, and then there's what may be left over from that, or even just forecasted, I guess is what I would say. Going back to that conversation earlier around, where is the gift card money coming from, right? What's the total, how much money is left that has yet to be truly allocated to anything across that original CRF money by maybe funds?
You're talking about the 1.2 billion, correct?
Yeah.
I actually do not have that one number in front of me, but I can get that to you, and I will explain to you why I do not have an exact number in front of me right now. I was informed earlier today that the Federal Emergency Management Agency will be reimbursing the state approximately, I don't know, I think we're going to get about between 30 and 60 million. I don't know what's coming in yet. And because of an accounting standard board's requirement, I cannot move that money off of the CRF expenditure account and put it into the FEMA account. So I'd like to get that journal entry done before I answer you and run the report. So if you don't mind holding on for maybe tomorrow afternoon, I can then give you the actual 1.2 billion came in, and this is what went out against it. And this is what is left to be encumbered.
Okay. Nope, that makes sense. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions or comments from the committee? Okay. All right. It appears not. I think that concludes us on DOA. Director Joe, anything that we are missing from a DOA perspective?
I have nothing additional, Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to testify tonight.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks so much for your time. I know it takes some patience to go through this material and appreciate it, and apologize to the group that's coming after us.
No worries. We were here till 11 last night. It's still early, so we're okay. But thanks.
Always, Mr. Chairman, if anybody has any questions, would like to contact me separately, I'm always happy to talk to folks. Great. And we'll do whatever we can to get the information that you're looking for.
Great. Thank you so much, Director. We appreciate you and the entire team being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next on our agenda is going to be the Public Utilities Commission. Again, we're going to be hearing their fiscal 21 and fiscal 22 budgets, as well as Article 8, Public Utilities and Carriers. Joe, do you want to do any intro remarks and introduce the administration members that are here?
Sure, I'm glad to introduce the administration members here. We have Linda George, the Administrator of the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, Ron Guratowski, the Chairman of PUC, and also some staff members joining in support. We have Anthony Manny, the Deputy Administrator of DPUC, Ron Davidson, their Chief Financial Officer, and Tom Kogut, Legislative Liaison for DPUC.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe, and welcome. Welcome to all those. I'm not sure, Administrator or Chairman, who's going to kick us off here, but we're ready for you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening. Thank you to the committee members as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Administrator of the DPUC, and Ron, the Chairman of the PUC, is here as well. We have provided the committee with a presentation that hopefully you all have. We will not be reading from the slides, but we will be referring to them in our brief testimony here tonight. And we're happy to answer any questions during this time. So Ron and I will briefly discuss our agency roles, and then I will highlight our shared budget and Budget Article 8, and then be available for questions. So while the division and the commission have a consolidated budget and are often referred to as the PUC or the commission, we're actually two separate agencies with two different but complementary roles. And I'm going to turn it over to Ron to speak to the PUC's jurisdiction first.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be in my first Senate hearing as Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission. I know you have a copy of the presentation, and as Linda said, I'm not going to walk through any of the pages, but I do have a few brief comments. And first, while the presentation does explain this, I think it's valuable to restate the difference between the PUC and the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers. As it mentions, we're labeled as the Public Utilities Commission, and it's kind of an historical thing that's happened, but we are two separate agencies that share costs and facilities. But I think the best way to visualize the difference between the two agencies is to look at the PUC more like a court that hears evidence, while the division is a party presenting evidence to the PUC in its role representing the ratepayers. Now, the division does have other responsibilities, which I'll leave to Linda to explain. But from my perspective, the PUC typically engages with the division in the same way that a court would engage with parties in litigation. At the PUC, we hear cases regarding utility rate increases. We approve programs like energy efficiency, energy procurement, service conditions, and some other matters as well. Our role also is to make sure that the utilities rates and the costs that the utilities are incurring to provide service are reasonable. I also see our role as assuring that the initiatives coming to us in filings are consistent with the policies that the General Assembly establishes and the executive branch. And there are also policy gaps that we need to fill from time to time. Finally, I'm also serve as the chairman of the Energy Facilities Siting Board. So this year, we're entering a new phase of utility regulation that's really moving fast and furiously towards initiatives and programs that have an important goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I expect to be seeing the complexity of matters to be increasing as the state moves aggressively to meet those goals. There are going to be a lot of initiatives, and the PUC will be reviewing the proposals very carefully to ensure they're being implemented in the most cost-effective way. That's just kind of an introduction that I wanted to do. I'm really looking forward to answering any questions that you might have, but thank you again, and I'll turn it back over to Linda.
Sorry about that. As Ron explained, the division's fundamental responsibility is its role as ratepayer advocate. It's a unique role in the state of Rhode Island. There's no other agency that's solely dedicated to ensuring the best interests of ratepayers in just and reasonable rates. But we also have a lot of other responsibilities. Those are highlighted on page 4, and I will mention a few. While gas and electric service tend to get the most attention, we also regulate 6 water utilities and the Narragansett Bay Commission. We also have exclusive jurisdiction over companies that provide in-state transportation of people and property, things that you might not necessarily equate with utility regulation, such as ferry service, taxi cabs, towing companies, household good movers, and rideshare companies such as Lyft and Uber. The division implements the state's gas pipeline safety inspection program. And in addition, we represent the state in all matters in federal court and before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. Please turn to slide 5. So that's our jurisdiction. We have other areas that we regulate, but I just wanted to provide a brief overview. Now, turning to slide 5 through 7, that's our budget summary, and you'll see that there are no significant changes to the fiscal year 2021 revised budget. And the only significant change in the fiscal year 2022 budget is a request for 2 FTEs for pipeline safety inspectors. These positions receive up to 80% of federal funds. The pipeline safety program serves a critical public safety role. It ensures the safe construction, operation, and maintenance of the local gas distribution pipeline system. And we feel it's very important to have that section of our office fully resourced. The last 2 slides summarize Budget Article 8, the Utility Emergency Response Plans. The division supports Budget Article 8. This article ensures that gas and electric utilities plan better for service interruptions and will hold utilities accountable when necessary. This article does 3 things. First, it requires electric and gas utilities to file with the division for review and approval annual emergency response plans. 2, the legislation provides that the division establish performance standards. And 3, the legislation adds a penalty provision that applies only to electric and gas investor-owned utilities. when they provide inadequate restoration efforts. The timing of Budget Article 8 couldn't be more relevant. As you may know, National Grid will be seeking division approval to transfer ownership of its Rhode Island gas and electric distribution companies to another corporate entity. That filing we received today. This legislation will give the new company and any other entity in the future clear regulatory guidance on our expectations for preparing and restoring utility service. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Administrator. Are there questions or comments from the committee? And I apologize.
Chairman?
Was that Senator Acosta?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. George, for your presentation. I have two unrelated questions. The first is whether your division also oversees internet service providers, and the second unrelated one was we got a pretty annoyed letter from National Grid arguing that they already comply by some of these regulations, which of course begs the question, then why would you be upset that we would be codifying them? So could you speak to that concern that they try to raise? And is it simply the case that they just don't want this to be formalized and that they're already doing this, or that the way that they're doing it currently doesn't quite go far enough to what our expectations?
Okay, both very good questions. Regarding internet service, I'm going to ask Tom Kogut. He is our associate administrator, and he is well-versed in internet issues. Go ahead, Tom.
All right, very briefly, the FCC really has the strongest position and is the dominant entity in terms of regulating internet. The states generally don't, unless they have their own state system, like a rural broadband cooperative, something along those lines, which we don't have in Rhode Island. So the short answer is that's really the purview of the FCC. We do regulate to an extent certain issues surrounding the cable TV industry. And those regulations were set up in a time where no one envisioned cable and internet being tied together with a similar pipeline of data. So we will field questions and concerns about internet service. We might direct people to the FCC. We might act in an ombudsman role outside of a direct regulatory authority to see if we can unbundle some issues and to assist customers. But in terms of regulation of internet, no, that really is an FCC provision.
Thank you, Tom. Senator, your question regarding a National Grid letter, I haven't seen the letter, but I am familiar with the position that the division has all the authority to review emergency response plans and investigate restoration efforts. And that's true, we do. In fact, we've held a few investigations following some storms where we felt the company didn't provide prompt restoration services. And we have orders on those. What this legislation will do will create a framework for us and allow us to prospectively regulate the utility regarding storm restoration. Right now, what we do is if there's a storm and there's an issue, we will open up a docket and look back at what happened. This will allow for a annual filing, a review of the plans, and then a comparison of the plan with restoration efforts. The framework also will include some performance standards, and one of those standards will be a report that will require the company, whether it's National Grid or a successor company, to report on their restoration efforts and any lessons learned. So that will allow for continuous improvement of restoration. And the really important piece here too is the fines, which are only assessed against investor-owned gas and electric utilities. The fines give us some teeth. Currently, our fines are limited to $1,000 per violation per day. And that's woefully inadequate as a regulator. We, for example, on the Aquidneck Island gas outage, that 10-day outage where a report, the division conducted an investigation and issued a report. We were only able to find the company. The maximum amount we were allowed was $39,000, which is woefully inadequate. This legislation will increase the fines. Now, as a regulator, we use fines or the threat of a fine to get a utility to focus on the things that are important to us or to policy directives that we get from the General Assembly or for the Governor's Office, such as restoration of utility services is important. So fines are a tool that says focus on what's important to us or you're subject to fines. And it is a very useful, whether you issue the fines or not, it's very useful way to change behavior and to focus resources of the company in an area to let them know it's important to us. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Senator DePalma.
Thank you, Chairman. Linda, good to see you.
Hello, Senator.
Good to see you back. Okay, so two comments. Director, we wish you could, were able to rate set cable TV. That'd be a phenomenal thing to do. It's I consider it to be a utility, just like the internet's a utility. The internet's a utility, given what we saw from an education perspective, everybody had to have it. Everybody was required to have it. Kids weren't having to go to school, they were going to school without having internet. Obviously, we saw some companies go to some areas that were internet dark, or whatever the right words, I don't know what the right words are for internet doesn't exist, and brought in some type of a 5G setup or whatever, or portable cell tower, mini cell tower for that area for communication. I'm not sure if it's been done across the country, so that's the first question. I got a couple others after. So have other divisions or PUCs, divisions like yourself, done that across the country? If not, how do we start that?
I can't speak for other jurisdictions, Senator, regarding 5G.
Not 5G, cable TV.
Cable, I can't speak for other jurisdictions, but I see Tom wants to chime in here.
And I know we've talked about some things in the past, but.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, I just think very briefly, I think, to divide the two issues between cable and internet. And clearly, in terms of rate regulation for cable TV, that sort of 1980s technology, the nation has moved away from state regulation of cable, only because it really is just the video product that we're talking about. The concern really is the adequacy, availability, the cost structure of internet. And again, as you very rightly point out, we've seen this so heavily underscored during the COVID response, the absolute need of residential service for broadband in homes, for education, support for people who are now working from home. I think, and this is why many other jurisdictions do have a centralized office that may deal with broadband coordination that can work with other entities. We don't have such a thing. So whether it's RIDE trying to coordinate their services for homeschooling or people developing telemedicine issues and solutions, it would be helpful if there was a singular clearinghouse. We simply don't have one.
So Tom, I know it's not necessarily, we don't want to belabor it here because it's getting late hour, but I'm not going to pick on Senator Siboney and I, or Senator Siboney and I, and Senator Felag, well, no, yes, we are fortunate. But from a Aquidneck Island perspective, we wish there was some competition. There is none. Even if you have something other than cable TV, I'm not going to mention the other providers or whatever, you still need internet from the one source you get. I don't know other sources you get it other than those. And it's not coming anytime soon. So it's one of those areas that's right for, I'll just say, I mean, we don't want to regulate a lot of things, right for regulator. Just given the situation we have, and the tens of thousands of people that are in the grip of one provider.
And Senator, and very briefly, I'll respond to that because it is something, certainly it's given me a lot of pause over the years. We only have one county in the state of Rhode Island that has a single broadband internet, yes, cable TV provider, and that happens to be Newport County, as well, you know. And I think there are certainly there are wireless solutions. There is a new Hughes network, which has gotten FCC approval to do a low-cost satellite expansion to cover some of our census tracts in the state of Rhode Island. That was an actual approval that had gone for ETC approval through the commission, one of the small areas where we collectively as regulators have a little bit of a role. So there is a little bit of help coming over the horizon. I will say this, Rhode Island's role, and again, cable TV as a precursor to internet, we never assumed an individual franchise, a monopolistic franchise for a municipality or a county or anything like that. We always opened the door to the possibility of an overbuild. And unfortunately for Newport County, that has happened just about everywhere else in the state where there are at least two main commercial providers. That's not to say in the future, and that's not to say that an internet provider might be able to offer some additional solutions, or there is the possibility, let's say, of municipal networks and other things that could fill in some of the gaps. But that's
I
it's not a regulatory bar.
I appreciate the possibilities of it, possibility theory. When we talk about probability theory, it's pretty low. So going back to a question Senator Acosta brought up earlier with regards to, so Senator Acosta on Thursday in the Commerce and Senator Sosnowski's committee, Senate Bill 570, which will be heard, mimics some of the stuff that the director is talking about with regards to emergency response planning, and just looking at what the teeth are in that. I'm not going to get to the details other than $100,000 for each violation, for each day in violation, with a maximum of $7.5 million. A little different than $39,000 that we experienced on Aquidneck Island back in 2019.
Yes, Senator, and there are two differences. The penalty provisions, the $1,000 violation per day, is the division's general penalties provision. The one in this budget article, as well as the bill that you referenced, would just be specific for violations of for failing to promptly restore service. So it's those fines. And I do want to say the fines are, the penalties in this legislation are modest compared to the two other states that we are our neighbors. That's Massachusetts, or not neighbors, but Massachusetts and New York. In Massachusetts, the fines for failure to promptly restore services, $250,000 per violation with a cap of $2 million. And in New York, it's $500,000 per violation with a cap that's a percent of the utilities gross revenues that is a significantly large number. So what is being proposed in Budget Article 8 and the bill that you just spoke about, very modest.
Director, thank you. And I will say, we do miss you in the Senate still.
Thank you. I enjoyed my time in the Senate.
Thank you, Senator.
Chairman, back to you.
Senator Seveny.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So if we go back to the budget summary, I'm trying to understand the numbers here. Because I think on the previous slide, you said you need about $250K for these two new FTEs for inspectors, right?
Yes.
But your budget's jumping, if you just look at the total on page 6, your budget's jumping about over 600K. So what are you doing with the rest of the money?
I'm going to have Deputy Tony Manny speak to that. Tony? There he is.
There he is. There he is.
Tony, did you hear the question?
Are you on mute? Is he on mute?
I think you're on mute. He's just in the office. Why don't you come in here, Tony, and speak to that? We had a similar problem earlier. I'm going to go get him. He's one office over. This is an important question, and he can explain that for you, Senator.
Okay.
Tony. My apologies, Senator. He's going to be right with us. Okay. Did you have another question while we're
No,
waiting for computer work?
That's the only one. Well, I do have a question. I guess the restricted receipt, this is the money that you guys harvest as a portion of what the ratepayers are paying to the utilities, right?
Yes, we're full. We are. We have no general revenue.
Right. Okay.
Are fully funded by ratepayers, and we have two different accounts for that. One is the we have a general account for our fixed costs to operate, basically, and then we have an account that's the reserve account. We call it a reserve account, but it is on page 8. That's
the money for specialists and expert. Okay, I got that.
That's the heart of being the ratepayer advocate and ensuring that there is a robust evidentiary record for Ron and his fellow commissioners to make good decisions based on data. We could not appear before the PUC without these specialized experts who dive into some pretty wonky topics.
Okay.
And our witnesses are made available to the PUC, and they're cross-examined, and the evidence is really vetted.
Okay.
So,
all right.
And we are an indispensable party before all proceedings at the commission, and that's because we represent the interests of the ratepayer. The PUC really relies on our deep dive and our look at all the issues, and we make recommendations in all the dockets.
Now this budget is for everybody, right? This is the PUC and the
So the general budget, the one that I spoke to that has fixed costs, that's 13923 is our general budget, and it's assessed to all utilities. The expert witnesses are just assessed to the utility that is appearing in the docketed matter before the PUC. So if it's an electric case dealing with National Grid, we will assess National Grid Electric. If it is a Narragansett Bay Commission issue and we have a expert on debt issuance, we will assess NBC the cost of that expert.
Okay.
So the expert witnesses are assessed specifically to the utilities, where our general account, the 39,123 account, is assessed to all utilities in a proportionate share. I think
that was way more than I could really keep up with, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
So let me ask you. Let me just ask you. The 750K is in the 12.4 that you're asking for?
No. Yes. Oh, it is. So here's Tony. He's going to come speak to that right now.
I apologize. I had some technical difficulties.
That's okay.
And literally in 5 minutes, I have to run, the building alarm is gonna set and I have to go turn it off, I'll be back. But the question you had, Senator, regarding the overall increase, okay? So from the revised, if you're looking at the slide, going from roughly 11.85 million to $12.5 million.
Right.
So the two requested positions are obviously in that, okay? So that takes up a chunk of that. The remaining dollars, and forgive me, I'll get you an exact analysis probably after the hearing, is due to we had to repurpose some positions internally. So we had 3 positions that we laid off at lower pay scale. We replaced them with higher paying pipeline safety inspectors. So that's some of the difference that you're seeing in the 22 is that the federal funds will cover up to 80% of it, but we cover the other half. Okay, so the other issue, the other reason for the increase is just general planning values, so healthcare, things of that nature. So again, I can get you an exact analysis, but the 3 major reasons for the increase in the budget is FTEs that we're requesting, some planning value changes, and then just a shift in the differential between the employees that we had to repurpose their positions to the new pipeline safety positions.
Okay, so, so the federal funds are some sort of match to what you're expending out of the restricted receipt? Is that how that works?
So the federal funds, it's a tricky mechanism. So there are 49 other state pipeline safety programs. So it all depends on what the other states ask for, how much the federal government decides to give us. Generally, 50-60%, but there are years, and then it also depends on it is a really tricky mechanism. It depends on the score of your program. So we are rated every year. You know, we have to do a certain number of inspections. We have to have a certain number of qualified inspectors. So it's easier just to say we get up to 80% of funding, but ballpark 50 to 60%. So it is some type of, it's not exactly a match, but.
Yeah, I'm not following it. You know, 50 or 60% of what?
The total cost of the program. So yes, the state of Rhode Island has to expend funds to get these funds, but it's not a true match in that sense, where there is no maintenance of effort clause. We don't have to, it's not like we spend 50, we get 50.
Okay, so this is, you're talking about the money within your budget that you're spending on pipeline safety. The federal government matches you 50 or 60 or 80% of that based on your score on how good you're doing. Is that what you're talking about?
So just to give you a quick easy, so let's say we spent a total of $100,000 on pipeline safety. If we score well and depending on the funding, we'll get 60,000 back. It's
okay. So it is whatever the federal funds are coming from. It's a proportion of whatever you're doing for pipeline safety. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yes, sir.
And that's all the federal funds. That's the whole source of the federal funds.
We have a small pipeline safety, and we also have a small through the same program, Dig Safe, one call before you dig.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Oh, okay. I guess I would like to see. I mean, there's a lot of money here that your budget's going up quite a bit. But.
Overall, if you look at the total, it did. But if you also look at just the shift, we almost are going to double our federal funds. So I know the total operations goes from 11.9 to 12.5, but doubling, almost 250, thousand of that is because we're doubling our federal funds. I do realize there is also an increase on the restricted side, which we'll get you the analysis for.
Yeah, you lost me again with how the federal funds work, but okay. It's late, I think I'm done. And you're gonna get alarmed here in a minute,
I think the
so.
point is just when you take a look at if you take a look at his 21 versus 22, right? So overall it goes from 11.8 to 12.5.
Right.
If you look at 21 versus 22, just federal money, it's 295,000 right there.
Yeah.
So it's just, that's kind of how it's pulling together. Senator Sosnowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Ron and Linda, for your presentation. And it seems like you're taking somewhat of a welcome, aggressive approach on some of these issues that have been plaguing Rhode Island, having to do with utilities. But I'll be looking forward to the exact analysis that Senator 70 had asked for as far as the gas line pipe inspectors and so forth. I guess my question is, well, first of all, lots of things end up in the budget. And we do have some bills that are addressing some of these issues in the Commerce Committee. But obviously, you folks feel that it is necessary to move these initiatives forward quickly or else they wouldn't be in the budget, correct?
Yeah, so you're talking about our pipeline safety inspection. We've grown the program significantly, and that's the reflection. While it's not a straight dollar for dollar, we've added quite a few pipeline safety inspectors. We had, frankly, an issue with retention, and we expect to lose pipeline safety folks when they get their federal certification and training. It's very valuable, and they are recruited by other utilities, and they can also work in another state's pipeline safety program and make more money. So we expect turnover, and hence the reason to repurpose 3 positions and put them in pipeline safety to grow the program. So that if we lose 1 or 2 inspectors, we are not we're not under-resourced, because we do have certain requirements we have to meet by PHMSA, in terms of inspections.
One thing I wanted to add to support what Linda's doing, even though it's not part of my agency, but I see what the effects are. The one thing that we all need to remember is that a gas system does not fail safe. And this is the only place that we as state regulators can do something to be checking on the utility and what they're doing to make sure they're doing things right. So it's not within my bailiwick, except maybe other things that come out of that. But as someone who has worked in the area and seen this, and also was quite involved with the Aquidneck Island investigation, it's a little unnerving to me that we're losing trained people who are going to higher paying jobs, and then we start over again, and then we have a shortage. It really is an area it's not like accountants are important. I have them there, but it's not like that. It's an issue that really affects the public safety. So I put that pitch in for my colleague.
Okay, thank you, Ron. When I started, we had 1 pipeline safety inspector. We hired a second. He quit in 90 days. It's a really hard job. It's very technical. You have to take a lot of training classes in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I do want to point out that PHMSA has strongly encouraged us that we increase the size of our program. They strongly support the 2 FTEs that we're asking for here in the 2020 fiscal year budget. This isn't a type of program where you can afford not to have a succession plan. And the 2 additional positions will help mitigate the impact of expected turnover.
So do we need the statutory changes in order to get more federal money? And I know, well, it's in the budget, but I'm curious if we need to have certain language in order to get that federal match or get more federal money.
No, we don't need that.
Okay.
If you're asking, if we need a change in our statutes to get more money for the federal PHMSA dollars for the pipeline safety program, the answer is no. What we need to be is fully resourced, so we hit our targets on inspection days and certified inspectors.
Okay, thank you. And then I know you haven't had a chance to see the National Grid letter, which was sent in opposition, but I would definitely like to hear, and Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if we could, with the committee, to have a response from DPUC and PUC to National Grid's issues in their opposition letter.
I'm happy to provide that, Senator.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and absolutely thank you, Administrator, for working with us on that. Senator Palmer?
Of course.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be quick. I know we're late at night. Chair Sosnowski, I suspect we'll probably see the same letter on Thursday in Commerce. So we'll see. We'll see it in duplicate, so to speak. But just going back to the pipeline, the PHMSA request requirement, whatever you want to call it. I'll say it's almost akin trying to get those folks as the state is trying. This is not an analogy on the SATs, but the state trying to get IT folks and hire IT folks to do IT work for the state. We're never going to pay them enough. We're not. We're just
right.
Private industry is always going to pay them more. So either one or two things to think about: pay the folks more so they stay, or you hire a contractor. I know we don't want to hire the work out, but if we're bringing somebody in and we're paying for their training and then they're leaving, it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, it's an in and out kind of, it's a revolving door. At some point, we have to look at it and say, either we fix the problem, or we're going to live with the situation we got and plan to hire every whatever epic somebody leaves. So, comment, thought?
So, Senator, I agree with you. We looked into hiring a consultant when the employee we hired after 90 days left. It was cost prohibitive, $320 an hour, I think $350. So we really couldn't afford that, even with PHMSA paying for a portion of that, and you need permission from them to pay for consultants. But we'd like to think we've got a new plan in place. I tasked my deputy, Tony Manny, to put together a professional path for pipeline safety folks so that as they get certified, they can make more money. And we are paying them more. And we're hoping that the pipeline safety guys that we've hired, some will follow that path and decide to stay with state government. But we do anticipate some leaving.
Director, thank you very much. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee besides Senator Seveny? All right. Thank you so much, Administrator. I think that does conclude the questions and comments. I want to thank the entire PUC and DPUC team for being here this evening. We appreciate you spending some time with us and going over your budget requests. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that,
Good night.
Thank you. With that, I do believe it concludes our agenda for the evening. Senator Seveny makes a motion to adjourn, second by Senator Cano.
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.